When I first stepped onto the cricket field as a young man, I had dreams larger than life. But those dreams were met with something most people fear: failure. I was labeled arrogant, inconsistent, even a liability at times. Critics questioned my place on the team, and teammates sometimes doubted whether I had what it took. There were moments I stood alone, hearing voices telling me I wasn't good enough, that I should step back, maybe even give up. And to be honest, in the quiet moments, I asked myself those same questions. But that's the thing about failure. It has a way of revealing who you really are. Not when you're winning, not when you're praised, but when you're doubted. When the world looks at you like you're finished, that's when you find out what you're made of. I learned early on that talent alone isn't enough. You can have all the ability in the world, but if you don't have the discipline, the mental strength, and the vision to channel that ability, you won't last. So I stopped listening to the noise and started working harder than ever before. While others trained for hours, I trained longer. While others played for the crowd, I played for the mission I carried in my heart. I studied the game, analyzed every weakness, not just in others, but in myself. I turned every defeat into data. Every dropped catch, every poor inning, every painful headline, I absorbed it all and turned it into fuel. Slowly I began to change. Not just as a cricketer, but as a leader. Leadership didn't come naturally. It was forged in the fires of failure. I remember captaining a team that had all the raw talent in the world, but lacked belief. It's one thing to have ability. It's another to know how to win when the odds are stacked against you. That was our journey. I had to teach a team and remind myself that we weren't defined by where we were, but by where we chose to go. That we could lose a match, but still win the battle inside. And if we kept winning that battle, the scoreboard would eventually reflect it. There was one moment in 1992 when everything came together. We were written off, dismissed as underdogs with no real chance. The media had already begun its eulogy, calling it a disappointing end. But what they didn't understand was that failure doesn't end you, it prepares you. That entire tournament, we played like a team that had been through fire. Calm under pressure, focused under chaos, and when the final came, we walked in not as a team of stars, but as a group of men who believed in something deeper. And that belief, that hunger that came from years of being doubted, carried us through. We didn't just win a World Cup that day. We proved that setbacks don't define your story, your response does. It was never about silencing the critics. It was about becoming who we were meant to be through the process. Because power doesn't come from avoiding failure. Power comes from walking through it, owning it, and coming out the other side more focused, more fearless, more unshakable. I'm telling you this because each of us, in our own way, faces moments like that. Maybe you've failed at something you poured your heart into. Maybe you're being told you're not enough. But let me tell you, the world will never hand you greatness. You have to earn it in silence, through effort, through pain, through the countless nights when no one is watching. And then one day, the world will see what you've become. Not in spite of your failures, but because of them. It is a kind of pain that doesn't just break you, it changes you. When you lose someone you love, someone who shaped your world, there's a silence that follows. It's not the kind of silence you escape by keeping busy or distracting yourself. It follows you everywhere. I remember watching someone I loved most suffer, watching them fade away in front of me, powerless to do anything. And the worst part wasn't just the disease, It was the help, the feeling that in that moment, with all the resources, all the access, all the connections, there was still no real answer, no real help, no dignity in the process. After that, nothing looked the same again. The world moved on, but I couldn't. Every conversation felt distant, every victory hollow. I carried that pain with me, not as a burden, but as a burning question. What now? What do you do with that kind of grief? You can either let it consume you, or you can build something with it. I decided to build. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. The idea was simple, but to most it sounded impossible. A state-of-the-art cancer hospital free for those who couldn't afford treatment. In a country where public health was broken, where even the basics were missing, people thought it was nothing more than a dream. I was told I was being unrealistic, that I was chasing something no one had done before, but pain gives you clarity, and mine was crystal clear. I wasn't going to let what happened to my family happen to others if I could help it. So I began step by step. I reached out, I raised funds, I spoke to anyone who would listen. And just like in every journey worth taking, I faced rejection after rejection. People said I was doing it for attention, for image, for anything but the reason I truly was. I let them talk, I kept working. Because when you're fueled by purpose, noise becomes irrelevant. There were moments when I thought maybe they were right, maybe it was too much, too ambitious. But then I'd remember those nights in the hospital. I'd remember the faces of the families sitting outside wards, hoping for some miracle. And I'd remind myself, this wasn't about me. This was about giving people hope where there had been none, dignity where there had been despair. Brick by brick, we built it, not with money alone, but with faith. The faith of ordinary people who gave what little they had, not because they knew it would work, but because they believed in the cause. And when the doors finally opened, when the first patient walked through, it wasn't just a hospital. It was a promise kept, a symbol that pain can be transformed, that personal tragedy doesn't have to end in silence. It can echo as something far more powerful. Today, I look back and realize that the most painful chapter of my life gave birth to one of its most meaningful ones. And that's something I want you to remember. Your pain is not the end of your story. You may not see it now, but inside, that suffering is a seed of something greater. If you choose to plant it, nurture it, fight for it, it can grow into something that serves others, something that outlives you. We all go through loss. We all face moments when life feels unfair. But in those moments, you have a choice. You can break down or you can rise up. And if you rise not just for yourself, but for others, you'll find a kind of power that no position, no title, no victory can ever give you. When I entered politics, people laughed. They didn't just disagree, they dismissed. Some thought it was a publicity stunt. Others said I'd be done in a year. They couldn't understand why someone would leave a life of comfort and admiration to step into one of the messiest, most unforgiving arenas imaginable. But what they didn't see was what I saw. I saw a system that was broken, not by accident, but by design. A system where power served the few and crushed the many. Where justice was selective and leadership meant privilege, not responsibility. I couldn't stay on the sidelines and watch it all happen. So I stepped in, knowing full well that I was walking into a storm. And I lost. Again and again, I lost elections, lost allies, lost reputation. Every time I stood up, the system found a way to push me back down. I would speak about reform, about accountability, about building a fair society, and people would respond with ridicule. It felt like talking to a wall. The media called me naive. The experts called me unelectable. Even some of those closest to me began to question why I kept going. And honestly, in those early years, it was hard to answer that question. But then I realized something. I wasn't losing, I was learning. I was learning how deeply the system was rooted in fear and greed. I was learning what people had come to accept as normal. I was learning that real change doesn't come from quick wins. It comes from standing your ground when it feels like no one is listening. It comes from being the only one in the room willing to say what no one else will. I stopped chasing shortcuts. I stopped trying to fit in. I decided that if I was going to fail, I would fail on my terms. By telling the truth, by fighting for what I believed in, and by refusing to play the same dirty game everyone else was playing. And something unexpected happened. People started to notice. Not the ones in power, but the ordinary people. The ones the system had forgotten. The students, the workers, the mothers trying to raise families in broken institutions. They saw someone who wasn't perfect, but who was consistent, who didn't bend when the pressure came. Slowly, the laughter turned into curiosity, and curiosity turned into hope. Not overnight, but year by year, brick by brick, a movement began to take shape. Not built on personality, but on principles, on justice, dignity, and self-respect. It took over 2 decades, 20 years of being mocked, misunderstood, misquoted, 20 years of losing elections, being sidelined, and watching others rise by doing the very things I refused to do. But I stayed the course. I didn't come into this to win easily. I came to shift a mindset, to challenge a deeply ingrained culture of corruption and compromise. And in time, the tide turned. The very people who once said, I couldn't lead, began to realize that leadership isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about staying true to your purpose, even when the whole world tells you to walk away. I want to say this to anyone who feels defeated. Whatever your fight is, don't measure success by how fast you win. Measure it by how true you stay. Because real power isn't given. It's earned in silence, in solitude, in struggle. And if you stay the course, if you stay honest, and if you lead with purpose, you'll find that even the longest road can lead exactly where you were meant to go. There were many moments in my journey when I could have taken the easy way out, when powerful people came forward with offers that promised influence, shortcuts, comfort. All I had to do was compromise a little, just stay quiet about certain truths, just soften the message, just play by the rules of the game. They said, that's how it's always been done here. If you want to succeed, this is the price. And I knew they weren't lying. That's how the system had survived for so long, by forcing people to choose comfort over conviction. But I didn't come into this to survive. I came to change something. And real change demands that you stand on something solid, something unshakable. For me, that was integrity. Not because it made things easier, but because it made everything clear. When you choose not to compromise, you stop chasing approval. You stop needing validation from the powerful. And in that space, you find something far more valuable. Authenticity, you know who you are, And more importantly, people begin to know who you are. They may not always agree with you, but they know you mean what you say. And in today's world, that alone is rare. The truth is, when you refuse to play dirty, you lose a lot in the short term. I lost elections I could have won. I lost allies who wanted me to be more flexible. I was isolated, criticized, and often portrayed as stubborn or unrealistic. But I never regretted it. Because what they call stubbornness, I knew was strength. And what they saw as failure, I knew was a foundation. I didn't want to build something that would collapse under pressure. I wanted to build something that could outlast me. That kind of stand has a cost. You will be targeted. Your name will be dragged through the mud. People will try to twist your words, question your motives, and make you doubt your own path. But what they can never take from you, if you protect it, is your moral authority. That's the kind of power that doesn't depend on a position or title. It comes from character. And over time, that kind of power speaks louder than any microphone ever could. What surprised me most was how people responded to that clarity. I thought I'd lose them, that they'd walk away, tired of the struggle, tired of the stand, but instead they began to lean in. Because deep down, everyone is searching for something real. They're tired of deception, tired of empty slogans and broken promises. And when they see someone who holds the line, even when it hurts, they respect it not because it's convenient, but because it's rare. I believe the greatest strength a person can have in leadership or in life is to know what they will never trade, no matter the offer. When people know your principles are not for sale, they begin to trust you. And trust is the real foundation of power. Not fear, not force. Trust. That's what turns followers into believers and moments into movements. So if you ever find yourself standing alone, wondering if it's worth it to hold on to your values when the world around you seems to move without them, don't let go. Because power that's built on integrity can't be shaken. It doesn't depend on who's in your corner or what polls say or who holds the keys to the office. It depends on the one thing that no one else controls: your choice to stay true. Every time I was knocked down, I had a choice to make: stay down or stand back up stronger. And I chose to stand. Not because I liked the pain, but because I knew pain had a purpose. Setbacks were never the end of the road for me. They were detours, sometimes brutal, often lonely, but they always led to deeper clarity. When things fell apart, I didn't just ask, why me? I asked, what can I learn? That shift in mindset changed everything. I remember the times when the defeats were public and humiliating. Elections lost despite years of effort. Betrayal by those I trusted, institutions turning against me. And yes, even imprisonment. When you sit alone in a cell, away from the noise and the crowd, stripped of position and surrounded by silence, you begin to confront everything. And strangely enough, that's when you grow. Not when the cameras are rolling, not when people are clapping, but when the world forgets you. That's when you start remembering who you really are. In those moments, I didn't feel powerless. I felt awakened, because each setback stripped away something false. It peeled away illusion, exposed weakness, and forced me to dig deeper. I began to understand that resilience isn't built during comfort. It's forged in crisis. You don't become a better leader by getting everything right. You become better by getting things wrong and refusing to let those mistakes define you. I didn't let losses make me bitter. I let them make me sharper. Every attack, every setback, every moment of isolation helped me understand the game more clearly. I started seeing not just how the system worked, but how to navigate it, how to challenge it without becoming part of it. And that was key. Because what's the use of winning if you become the very thing you are fighting against? I realized I didn't just want to reach the top, I wanted to deserve being there. Sometimes people think strength is about never falling. It's not. Strength is about rising differently each time. I used to respond emotionally, react quickly, try to fight everything at once. But over time, I learned the power of patience, of timing, of choosing the right battles. I learned to listen more carefully, to read people more deeply, and to trust my instincts, but only after refining them through failure. That kind of transformation doesn't happen in victory, it happens in loss. I began to see that each setback was actually preparing me for something greater. Without them, I wouldn't have had the depth, the understanding, or the humility to lead anything meaningful. Setbacks taught me not just how to win, but why to win. They reminded me of the people I was fighting for. When I failed, I didn't just feel my own pain. I saw the pain of those who believed in the same dream. That kept me going. Not pride, not revenge, purpose. We often think growth is about progress, about moving forward. But real growth sometimes means pausing, stumbling, even falling backward, so you can see the road ahead with new eyes. It's in that space between failure and recovery that real power is born. Power that doesn't just win battles, but transforms them. Power that's not dependent on circumstance, but grounded in identity. So whenever you face a setback, and you will, don't fear it. Use it. Let it teach you. Let it break the parts of you that need to go. Let it rebuild you into someone stronger, wiser, more focused. Because the goal isn't to avoid struggle. The goal is to emerge from it as someone who can no longer be shaken. People often ask, what keeps you going after all the losses, betrayals, prison cells, and the endless resistance from every direction? What still fuels the fire? And the answer is simple: the people. When you walk among those who have nothing, when you look into the eyes of a child who has been denied education, or a mother waiting hours for basic medical care, or a young man desperate for a fair chance, you stop thinking about yourself. You stop thinking in terms of comfort or convenience. You start thinking in terms of duty. Because leadership, real leadership, isn't about power. It's about responsibility. I've seen this nation rise and fall in cycles. Hope rising like a wave, only to crash against the rocks of broken promises and failed systems. But through it all, the spirit of the people never dies, and that's what inspires me. I don't lead from palaces. I lead from the streets, from the villages, from the homes of ordinary families who still believe that change is possible. They're the reason I keep standing. Every time I've been knocked down, it's been their support, their prayers, their belief that lifted me again. But let's be honest, building a movement from the ground up isn't romantic. It's messy, it's painful, it takes everything out of you. There were times when I questioned whether people would ever truly awaken, whether all the effort, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices were really making a difference. But slowly, I began to see something shift. People stopped waiting for saviors. They started believing in their own voice. They started showing up, not just at rallies or elections, but in conversations, in communities, in acts of courage. That is when I knew something powerful was happening. You see, change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the ground up. The most powerful movements in history weren't sparked by politicians. They were driven by people who refused to accept injustice. And I knew from the beginning that if I truly wanted to bring about transformation, I couldn't just fight for the people. I had to fight with them. I had to earn their trust, not through slogans, but through sacrifice. And once that connection was made, once they knew I wasn't going to abandon them no matter what, I didn't need to shout. They carried the message for me. It's a different kind of power, the one built on the shoulders of people. It's not flashy. It doesn't rely on propaganda. It grows slowly, but it grows deep. And when it finally rises, it becomes unshakable. I've seen people stand in the face of bullets with nothing but belief in their heart. I've seen youth lead from the front. Mothers walk for miles to vote. Workers defy fear to speak the truth. This is the real power. When a nation finds its voice, when people stop fearing the system and start owning their future. This journey has taught me that leadership is not about never falling, it's about rising every time, knowing your rise gives others the strength to rise too. It's about taking the hits so others can breathe freer. And if you truly want to leave something behind, something that outlives you, it won't be in titles or trophies. It will be in how many people you help stand taller because you stood your ground. So when they ask what keeps me going, the answer is this: the dream of a people who refuse to surrender. A nation that deserves better, that's ready to break free, to lead with dignity and build with courage. My power has never been mine. It has always come from them. So when you look at this journey, not just mine, but the collective struggle we've all been part of, you'll see that failure was never the end, it was the beginning. Every setback carved out strength. Every loss sharpened purpose. And every time the world said, "You can't," it became fuel to prove that we could. This was never about rising alone. It was about rising together. And if there's one truth I've learned through it all, it's this: when your cause is just, your heart is clear, and your fight is for something greater than yourself, nothing can stop you.